It's now my pleasure, or both, to introduce you to our guest tonight. Sheridan Hay is a writer and scholar and a rock star among reading group leaders here at the Center for Fiction. She led the Moby-Dick reading group, so a special welcome to those of you who participated in that. And I'm happy to bring her to you in real life. Joining her are Leonard Foglia, director of Moby-Dick, and Gene Scheer, the librettist of Moby-Dick. And that opens on March 3rd. So if you don't have your tickets, I think you got a flyer that has information. So without further ado, please give them a warm welcome.
Hi. Hi, everybody. How wonderful to see you, and thank you so much for coming. I'm so excited to have Gene and Lenny here. It's a very unusual event for us because usually we're just a bunch of writers or readers talking to each other, and here we have masterful theatrical geniuses. So, who have had the remarkable, incredible opportunity to work on a masterpiece and to adapt it for an opera. And I think probably I've read the libretto a few times and I haven't seen the opera yet, but I'm so excited to see it. But I've been spending hours on YouTube so that I could listen to the music and see some of the staging, but these are, of course, earlier versions. So perhaps you're aware that the opera debuted in Dallas in 2010. So you've been living in Melville world off and on for 15 years or so. So perhaps you could talk, Jeannie, first about really how does a 600-page novel, and for those of you who've been reading it with me for 8 weeks, you know the complexity and the astonishing range of Moby-Dick. How does that become a 60-page libretto?
Well, thank you very much for having us, and I'm very excited to share the production with you. Hope you get to see it. It's really a stunning production that Lenny has led, and with this a world-class cast. It's an extraordinary experience having it at the Met and to share our excitement about it with you. But how this began is, it's a line, it began with a phone call from the producer. And at the time, the Dallas Opera was playing in the Opera House, the Opera House, which opened in 2010. And Jake Heggie and Jake Heggie was approached. Not surprisingly, opera is composer-centric in terms of the commissioning of operas. And Jake was approached by the Dallas Opera, and they said they wanted him to do a piece for the inaugural season of the Winspear Opera House. And Jake, who had written Dead Man Walking, an opera based on Dead Man Walking, with Terrence McNally, was going to work with Terrence on this project, and Terrence suggested Moby-Dick. And they hadn't started work on it yet, but when Jake told Jonathan Pell, who was the head of the Dallas Opera, we have an idea, we want to do Moby-Dick, and there was a silence on the phone. He said, do you have another idea? So I said, no, we really want to do this. And what happened was Terrence, because of a health issue at that time, had to withdraw from all of his projects at that time to deal with his health concerns. And Jake, with whom I had been working, I had written some pieces with Jake and opera with Jake and other things with Jake, called me and explained the situation and said, would you consider doing this? And I said, well, I was very interested, but I said, let me reread it again. I had read it in high school, and it skipped all the chapters on cetology. And
nobody in the reading group skipped the chapters on cetology, right?
No, but I read it again, and he read the entire thing. And just parenthetically, I have to say some of those chapters are my favorite chapters. And I saw what Terrence, why he was so excited about the prospect of doing it. It's daunting. I could talk a long time. I'll try not to. It was a daunting thing to take this large novel. But the story of Moby-Dick is actually quite focused. It's a dense and very rich and deep story, of course. But what happens in the novel is dramatically is it's a very focused story. And that's good for opera. Opera does big well. It does big emotions well. Its history started with writing about things based on mythological subjects and political subjects, Shakespearean subjects. And Melville seemed like this book seemed like a great point of departure. The things, I'm always looking for what I call the layups when I'm looking at a source. What are the things that are sort of self-evidently operatic? There's scenes in the book which I thought were self-evidently operatic, and there's language. And I'm always asked how much of the opera is from the book and how much did I write. About 50% of the text, more than any other piece I've ever written, is really from the book, culled, manipulated, and such. But it is
later after we hear some music, I'd really like to talk to you and ask you about specific, because I think one of the masterful things that you've done in the libretto is I was expecting that there would be sort of a conflation, but in fact it's an invention.
Yeah.
And so you were writing in the voice of Melville, in the voice of the character, and you're giving a sense of the particular circumstance, taken from other parts of the book.
Right.
But it's your words.
Here's the thing. I mean, when there's no narrator in an opera, but there is. The narrator is the composer.
Right.
The composer is the person, he or she, who is infusing all of the emotional content, all of those descriptive passages, all of this. They're giving you the feeling of what of reading the book felt like. And Jake is a brilliant composer, and he's written a brilliant score. In order to tee it up so that music could win the day, I realized, as Lenny and I have talked about this, Lenny was the dramaturg on this project, that I needed to do what we do in the theater, which is show a story, not tell a story.
Right.
And in order to do that, I realized Jake broached the idea of having, this is spoiler alert, Call Me Ishmael, which is, of course, the first line of the book, be the last line of the opera. And it opened up the idea of making this piece about the education of Ishmael. And so we're watching him have the experiences that he has collectively, which prepare him to write the book. And and then all of a sudden, it all happens in what I call real time. We watch him meet Queequeg. We don't tell about the story. We watch him meet Queequeg. And in order to do that and to make it into a 2.5-hour opera, I had to conflate and thread together the story and create things. You know, it's funny. Nathaniel Philbrook is a fan of the opera. And one of the things that Jake and I did, he's a wonderful writer. I'm sure you folks know about him. And we went to Nantucket to talk to him when we were starting this project. And he came to the opera. He was very supportive of it and very helpful too. Mm. And he said to me, I saw him backstage after the premiere, and he went, "I like the changes." And the thing is, for those of you now, 70 or so of you have read the book recently, you'll notice the changes. Most people have not read Moby-Dick, you know. And so there's things like, in the book, they're hunting for whales all along. I prevented them from hunting for whales, except for Moby-Dick, to create that kind of tension. And there's other things all the way that are threaded throughout. There were slight changes in perspective that would allow it to be theatrically realized.
It is such a, as you say, it's such a combination of intense theatricality in the novel, but also it has all of these intimacies as well as great gales, theatrical gales. And so, Lenny, at what point were you brought into as a dramaturge? Because one of the genius things of Melville, of course, is to have recognized that to have had this kind of channeling of Shakespeare. So, I mean, already it's sort of set up as a kind of theatrical reality, right? The Shakespearean boards are literally the boards on the Pequod, right? And so, I just wonder, you must have had your own ideas from the get-go.
Well, I was brought in at the very beginning.
Yes.
I believe before you even wrote anything.
Early on.
I did very, very early on, which was very helpful. So the whole process was very organic, and so I always feel like my job as a dramaturg, at least as a director and dramaturg, is really to be the first audience. I'm not telling anybody what to do. So Gene would run scenes by me, then I would ask questions if things weren't clear to me. So I'm the first one that has to receive it, and it has to all make sense to me. And so that's the simplest description of what I did early on. And then the three of us were there together. There were actually elements of this story which came together basically out of our discussions. The three of us just deciding, this character needs to be seen more, especially the character of Greenhorn, Ishmael, was a character that was I think his character was made larger in the course of creating it. So
that's one of the astonishing things I've seen is the music, as you say, provides, all of the sort of metaphysical and emotional realities are provided by music. But one of the astonishing things is when you think something has been compressed, and in fact it's paradoxical, it's enlarged, it's emotionally, in terms of how you decided to treat the characters and narrow, to a large extent. Because, of course, as you know, there's anywhere between, Melville tells us several times, there's 30 people on the Pequod, but if you count them up, there's about 45 at any given time.
Yeah, we have 80.
It's opera.
It's opera. It's a big ship. But we do have 80, and it's the largest cast we've ever had. 45 chorus, 25 actors, and 8 principals.
And are you counting Moby-Dick in that?
Well, that's a big question that everyone, from the very beginning, before anybody saw it, the first question was, are we going to see the whale? And you're the expert, so I will try to quote this line semi-accurately, but I would always come back and say, well, I'm going to follow Melville when he says, the great Leviathan is the one creature that must remain unpainted until the last. I love that word, unpainted. So I leave him unpainted until the last. So
he left it almost unpainted till the last. It doesn't appear until page 567 or something.
Well, here you get a glimpse.
Get a glimpse.
At the last second.
One of the things that Lenny, as you said, we worked together throughout. When he hit this line, which really became the North Star for me, he said, imagine it, let me figure out how to stage it. And so I was, the tasks that I put, I gave Lenny and his design team were formidable. Those whaleboats going down, which is really its iconic image and moment in the show, and I think it's extraordinary. It was a hard task to destroy the Pequod.
Yes.
To hunt down whales on an operatic stage seems almost impossible.
It seemed impossible. In even discussions with Jake and Gene, at first they said they had a different way of doing it.
I don't even remember that.
And I do. And I did say to them, don't worry about it. I'll figure it out later. And then Jake gave me 12 measures to sink the Pequod. And probably 6 measures to get into whaleboat. I mean, it all happens very fast, and that determined the style of the productions. I'm actually very grateful for it.
Well, I would imagine the other challenge too, among many challenges, is the character that you can't write, but that Jake can write, which is the ocean, the sea, which imbues everything all of the way through the novel, and that's got to have been, as a dramaturg and as a director, how to manifest
Well,
the vastness of the ocean, the masterless sea. As Melville
the goal was to see it from their point of view. If any of you come to the opera, you'll see that you never see the complete ship on stage. You're always seeing it from angles, from points of view, so that you're always in their viewpoint all the way through. And even at the Met, it took months and months and months. They allowed me to bring the set partly over the orchestra pit, so that I wanted people to feel what they're feeling rather than watching it from a distance. And that was one of the big challenges. Yeah. About as immersive as you can get in a 3,000 seat house. More than that.
But the beauty of the music, of course, carries the depth of the emotion. And one of the things that I was reading, I was interested that Jake said as soon as he read the novel, the music was all there.
Right.
And so it was just a question of being able to get it all down. Oh, okay, sorry.
Also, it's people ask about how you come up with certain things. How did you know how I was going to stage it? Did you know how it was going to be? I didn't know anything until I heard the music.
Right.
And once I heard the music, the way I've asked Jake many times, how do you write music? And he says he hears it. And when I hear it, then I see it. Like I had no plans on how to solve these problems that we talked about early on until I heard the music. And then so everything I do is inspired by the music.
It's really an astonishing thing, because when I read the libretto and you can read it quite quickly because it's only 60 pages, but then you go and listen to some of the music and you go back to some of the pieces, and it seems unfathomable how the level of complexity that is conveyed in the same words that I had just read, but of course that are sung. And I think I read somewhere that Jake said, there are some emotional transitions that are so large, they can only be sung. And I thought that was a really remarkable perception because you have written a completely different sort of trajectory for Greenhorn/Ishmael.
Right.
He's not a wise, philosophical, jokey fellow.
The book is a memoir. He's telling you, he's explaining what happened years ago. And as I said earlier in our conversation, that doesn't work on the stage. What works is watching something unfold in front of you. It's one thing to say, I met this woman, it was so wonderful, it was fantastic, and it was on the street, and something fell down, and just do it. Just watch two people, they're on the street, and that's La Boheme, only it's in a garret,
Yeah, we experience it through Greenhorn's eyes.
Well, speaking of how transfixing and transporting the music is, Lenny, perhaps you'll set up the
I've been doing it for 15 years, but I still wrote something down, so I wouldn't forget.
Starbuck is going to sing.
That's right.
For us.
So very early in the opera, in the very first scene of the opera, Ahab makes clear that this is not going to be an ordinary whaling mission. That the crew has only one destination now, and that's to find Moby-Dick. And Starbuck confronts him about that when Starbuck realizes this is not what he signed up for, and even considers Ahab to be blasphemous at this point. 3 months later, Starbuck goes down to Ahab's cabin to inform him that they need to go to a port for repairs. Ahab, completely unmoved by this, says, "We're not stopping at any port for repairs. We're going along my mission." Starbuck doesn't accept that, sort of like insubordination, would you say? Ahab takes out a musket and threatens to kill him for going against him. The scene you're about to hear is later that night when Starbuck goes back once again to Ahab's cabin finds him asleep. And as Starbuck comes into the cabin, he sees the gun that could have killed him earlier in the day. So here we have, is that okay? I got them guns. Okay, here we have Thomas Glass singing Starbuck and Bryan Wagorn on the piano. Come on in, guys. It's Bryan. And even though this is technically an aria, it's actually a two-person scene. And Bryan will be stepping in for the sleeping but restless Ahab.
Captain Ahab, I must speak with you, sir. He's sleeping. You would have shot me. There's the very musket he pointed at me. Oh, dear. And powder in the pan. He would have killed me with the very thing in my hands. Why would he fain kill all his crew? My soul swears this ship will come to deadly harm. What cares Ahab? Is there no other way, no lawful way? Make him a prisoner to be taken home. Wrest the old man's living power from his own hands. Only a fool would try it. Men have vowed thy vows. I know all of us are Ahabs. Lord, is it murder to strike a would-be murderer in his bed? Oh Lord, what shall I do? One touch and Starbuck may survive to see his wife and child again, return to them alive. Oh Mary, oh my
And I
So
presume
gorgeous.
that's Gene's line, but it's such almost existential question about, is it murder if you're doing the right thing? It's like the old thing about, had someone killed Hitler in that theater that day.
Right. But because of the music and because of the way you have what you have granted Starbuck, he's elevated as a character with far greater resonance, to my view, than in the novel, actually. And even the fact that you have him sing, "We are all Ahabs now,"
Right.
Which is your line. It takes away from Ishmael, Ahab's, mad quest was mine, and it gives it this other level of grandeur. And one of the things that I think is so interesting in reading the libretto and what I was watching was the theatrical decisions that you made to elevate the four characters, essentially, and there's a quartet. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit when they're both up the mast. So we have Queequeg and Greenhorn / Ishmael, and we have Starbuck and Ahab, and they're equals. This is an astonishing thing for a Melvillian. Yeah? Go ahead.
Well, it's an opera, so it's one of the things you want to do is take advantage of what opera can do. One of the things that opera can do, which is really hard to do in a play, if not, maybe not impossible, but pretty much impossible, is have people sing simultaneously. And the glory of music singing in a quartet was something that I know Jake and I really wanted to, and Lenny wanted to employ. And, my perspective on this, it is true I did elevate Starbuck. I just was thinking that old Hitchcock line, movies are just like life with all the boring parts taken out. And there's heightened reality. I've said before, I can say it here, writing an opera libretto is not that dissimilar to writing a scenario for a silent film. There's large gestures, and in that case, the great art was from the cinematographer and the performers, of course. Here, it's also, I'm trying to create scenes. Each scene is something that, even without words, with what Lenny's brilliant direction and his incredible team of designers, you kind of know what's going on. And then, of course, the subtlety is where the music is. I'm trying to tee this up so that music can win the day. That's as much as I appreciate the fact that when there's a good turn of phrase and language is rich or it works. But ultimately, why are we here? We're here because of music to work its magic. So with that in mind, that quartet that you mentioned, I wanted to solidify the relationship, the sort of, in the book and in the opera, Ishmael is learning from Queequeg. That's the person with whom he forms this important relationship. And again, as I said earlier, it's the education of Ishmael. So he's watching, the Greenhorn / Ishmael is watching all these different people sort of represent different ways of approaching one's life. And so you have Ahab's obsession is an inability to accept the world and to fight his way. There's Starbuck's religious answer to things, and Flask and Stubb, who just sort of laugh their way through life.
Shakespeare's profane characters.
Profane characters who don't take things too seriously, and they're going into a storm and say, "Well, let's sing a song." He says it's like, let's just turn on the channel and let's not think about what's just happened in the election or whatever. And then of course there's Queequeg, who represents a different way. In the line which I did use in the opera from the book, "I'll try a pagan friend, for Christian kindness has proved but hollow courtesy." And so his relationship with Queequeg, and of course he's saved by Queequeg's coffin. And so this quartet is where I'm establishing this relationship between Queequeg and Ishmael, And we're watching Starbuck realizing that he's losing control of the situation. He's lost control of the situation. And then Ahab thought, he's made the plan. He's told everyone what they're going to do. And he thought, I thought it would be harder to get these people. But somehow they all followed me. They all came to the convention, and they all and they all followed me.
But
So
I think the remarkable thing in the quartet, though, is the words that you have given them is that what you just described, Queequeg and Greenhorn, and they're essentially singing kind of love and friendship.
They're singing a love and friendship, which is he's learning from Queequeg, and the sort of that's on the surface it's that, and then I say it's their relationship is developing there, and it's the opera opens with Queequeg singing a Samoan chant, and he's Ishmael in this part of the quartet is asking him, tell me what that meant, what it is. And the chant that I found in the New York Public Library, thank you very much, really, to me, it wasn't exactly this, but it was very similar and rhymed with, let's say it that way.
Yes.
It rhymed with the Arjuna Krishna story, and about showing up and fulfilling your responsibility to fight. And fight can mean many different things. It doesn't necessarily mean battle. It can also mean just showing up in life, and this is the kind of Eastern sort of spiritual world, that doorway that Queequeg is taking Ishmael through. And while that's happening, we have these other two guys who are singing their different perspectives. I wanted to take it like it's almost as if Ishmael is the needle and pulling the thread all the way through, and then weaving a story of life and a map of life. A tapestry map of life.
Well, the weaving is, of course, that's
I know,
great
of course.
Metaphor, starting with loomings.
And and that line is on the treadle of that's in his aria in Act 2.
Yes.
So so that's but the real answer is you want to make this music that really speaks to it. I think one of the challenges with opera that nowadays, with lots of them, it's wonderful that all these new operas are happening, but it's really important not to make it a script, to make it an opera. And in order to do that, you need to employ what opera does so beautifully. And one of the things is people singing together. So.
One of the other genius moves, it seems to me, is to have made Pip a pants role. Whose idea was that?
That was Jake's idea, and or something. It might have been Terrence's idea. I don't know, but that was when Jake approached me about this. He said, it all happens on the Pequod. That was and Pip is a pants role, and Ben Hefner will play Ahab, which he did for the premiere, and he was spectacular. As is Brandon Jovanovic here at the Met. So it was Jake's idea. It was a great idea because Jake reminded me today at lunch. He said, the first outline you sent was all about Pip. I was obsessed with the character of Pip.
Well, in this same way that we're talking about illuminating Starbuck, Pip is much, much larger character and is a kind of a linchpin between these two pairings, these two foils, and moves between the two of them, and the madness is far, far more affecting as a consequence of having elevated that character to a larger role.
That's a question of conflating the story. Queequeg does save someone at sea earlier in the novel, and I have him save Pip. And then because first of all, you can only have a certain number of characters. There are limitations. Which limitations are good because we don't want this to be, a 10-hour opera. But I also wanted to get at least the flavor of Fedallah in the opera. So when Pip is lost at sea and goes sort of having a split personality and becomes almost a seer in the way that Fedallah does.
It makes a bit of a prophecy.
Prophecy, and she's the one who says, "I see you, Ahab, tied in hemp." But
it's such a wonderful conflation because when Pip is mad, as you remember, and conjugates the verb I see, he sees.
Yes.
So Pip is the seer, and
Right,
it's
and that was-
constantly saying "see."
And the other thing about it is that, there's two moments in the opera, and maybe it's been a while since I read the book, but that there's, Ahab is, yes, he's maniacal, and yes, he's obsessed with, but there are these moments. The symphony chapter is one, which becomes this big duet in Act Two. And when Pip's madness, the way in which Ahab responds to Pip is human and compassionate. And it's like, there's something inside him that he's not completely hollowed out. He's not been completely gutted of his humanity. And it's there. And you watch that, as Lenny, a lot of the rules of writing things have come from Lenny, and I've learned a lot from him over the years. And one of the things you've said to me is that, paradox is where, it's very Whitman-esque, right? That paradox is again, the doorway to truth. Mm-hmm. And so to watch Ahab's humanity in these two moments in the show, and then in the symphony, Starbuck think he has him. He's come back to life. I think we're going to do this. It's going to be okay. And then Ahab has this incredible, he just cannot, it's like a drug addict. He cannot put down, or an alcoholic, he can't put it down.
But you've made another marvelous sort of thread that isn't necessarily in the novel. The thread, because Greenhorn Ishmael is not the wise soul telling it in retrospect, but is a lost boy,
right? And
goes to sea because he's lost, and then Pip becomes the lost boy, and Captain Gardner's son is lost, and Ahab has a son, and Starbuck has a son. There is this sort of, remarkable chain of emotion built around. So Pip doesn't serve to just highlight Ahab's humanity, but all of their humanity.
That's well put. I think it does serve in that way, and I haven't heard it put like that. It's really well put. I think it is the effect of how Pip plays out on the stage. Yeah.
How did you decide to? Oh, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but when Pip is lost at sea, it must be an extraordinarily dramatic moment.
Right. You just
that was another easy task. I said whaleboats, and Pip is lost in the middle of the ocean.
At sea. Well, it's been out there for a while, so it's not giving out a lot. But
you can see it on YouTube.
You can see it on YouTube. I say that opera singers, count on two. What they have to do is so extraordinary, and they count on having their 2 feet planted on the ground so they can produce the way Tomas just did. I've taken that away from all of them. Ahab's on one leg. Pip sings her hardest aria by one string hanging from
moving.
When you're moving from a wire.
How high is she?
She's high. She's high. And I have people climbing, they're on trusses, they're on ladders, so all the things, most people count on. But I think it's what's always brought the cast made them really focus on what they're doing. And I think brings a lot of excitement to the cast. I mean, hopefully to the audience too, but in order to get the reality of what's happening on the ship up and down, like the quartet that you mentioned, Queequeg is, 25 feet in the air doing that.
And when Queequeg takes ill, as he does in the novel, he takes ill up the mast.
Yeah, he almost falls off of that. So it's a lot of fight coordinators, a lot of things a lot of people at the Met keeping everybody safe.
That was
because it's not an easy production, is it, Tomas? No.
Yeah. I mentioned that we went to Nantucket. Jake and I did to go to the Whaling Museum, and that scene that was crystallized for me when I went to the Whaling Museum.
Oh, interesting.
I had read a lot of books on doing my due diligence. Being in the museum and seeing this ship, the models of the ship, and realizing that there are 3 mastheads on an oil ship. And I've just missed it, and then it just crystallized that you have these 2 guys who are close friends, and Queequeg gets sick. They're both on the top of the masts, and he gets sick on the top of the mast, and Ishmael Greenhorn can't reach him. And he wants to come down to him, and Ahab says, "Hold your post." So it's this conflict. We're watching this unfold in real time. And finally, the crew finally stand up and offer some resistance. And Ahab, as in the book, says, "All right, I'll go to the masthead." So you have this crazy guy on one leg, flying up, which
there's that too.
There's that too.
Yes.
We have a guy on a peg leg about 50 feet up in the air.
The other challenge is the candles, right? St.
Elmo's
fire
Right.
illuminating.
That's right.
It's Lear on the Heath, right?
Right.
It gets
and
to really
and we're doing that very
town.
differently here at the Met.
Yes,
so whatever
actually,
you saw on YouTube is now
No,
history.
well, actually, could you talk about? I think it's so important and so wonderful to have Moby-Dick at the Met because, of course, Melville was a New Yorker.
Yes, he was.
So what? And you've had 15 years of productions, not consistently, obviously, but so what has shifted? What's new in the Met production?
Well, one of the things that the Met is an unusual space, and very rarely are prosceniums taller than they are wide. Usually, and the Met has a very, very high proscenium, so it's allowing for a lot more height, which maybe doesn't thrill a lot of the singers, but it's allowing for a lot more height and just a different visual perspective that is very exciting. We've never been able to see to the top of the set before,
Right.
Because it goes up. Certain people in the orchestra can see it, but other people couldn't hear because it's so tall. We're able to use the full height, and
So the grandeur has even increased.
And also, it's honestly, the Met is the Met. They have the instruments, the lighting instruments are more powerful. They're just there's a shine on this production that is, even though it's production that Lenny had created over the years, it really looks extraordinary in the house. And the singers are just.
To that end, Lenny, could you just mention for people the projections that are involved in the production? You don't have to describe them in detail.
I would describe them. But obviously, we use a lot of visual. There are projections, there are animation. There are a lot of things which we use. I don't want to
Elaine
describe
McCarthy
things
is the
visually.
person who did it.
And Elaine McCarthy, who's been one of my collaborators for 25 years. She did Wicked and a million other things. She's a genius, and she's in there working today, improving things today, changing things today. What do you think about this new thing? I think I can make this better. She never ever stops, and she has an extraordinary team. Yeah. So I give it all to her.
That scene with St. Elmo's Fire is, the crew interprets what's happening. It's like in the book. They interpret what's happening differently than Ahab. But whatever it is, it's deemed to be a divine intervention of sorts.
Do you all know what St. Elmo's Fire is?
It's when
the scene in the chapter's called The Candles, and they're sailing right into
119.
Sailing right into a typhoon, and
right. Yeah. And because of an electrical effect, the masts are illuminated.
Every pointed object
and
produces the fire.
And it's like it's late in the piece or later in the piece, and it's like even something that is God has come to speak, and Ahab says, "I don't care." Right. So it's like
strike
even
the sun if
strike the sun if it insulted me.
Which is
so he's So it's everything is
another. Speaking of this paradox, and then we'll take some questions. This idea of sort of paradox being the door opening. One of the things that strike me is because of where that is, the candles and the storm is where that is in the libretto now and in the opera, and it being in the novel, it's really arguably the most dramatic. It's the peak of the narrative, of a very digressive, unconventional narrative. And it seems such a fascinating paradox to me that you are forced into a linear structure away from digression, and it's actually deepened the work. You know, it's such an interesting kind of contradiction.
It's an interesting task. I've said this the other day that, one thing about, I was thinking about it because of the new production here, and I don't know if this rings true or not, but it was just a thought I had that, when you drop a stone in a pond, the ripples go out sort of equally, and you drop the story of Moby-Dick in a pond, that it's an asymmetrical pattern that goes off. And I think where we try to get the feeling of that is through the music. Ryan Speedo Green, who is extraordinary as Greek. That is a voice of epic proportions. He said, when we were rehearsing in the room, he said, it's so interesting because there's so many different kinds of music in this. He said, there's things that feel very linear and melodic, and there's things that feel like they're aleatoric or not atonal. Nothing is atonal in the piece, but very, very complicated harmonies. And Ahab's music is very, very challenging. And it's that kind of how it splatters, and that's the feeling of it. When I think about all the things, these adaptations I do of novels, and I've done a bunch of them now, trying to get to the feeling of reading the book, not the letter of reading the book, because we're not putting a book on stage, we're putting an opera on stage. But what does it feel like, And here, hopefully the music is the thing that leads the way to become Melville's voice.
And filled with all the metaphysics that you can't have included. But who was it said that every art is constantly aspiring to the quality of music, to attain the quality of music. It's the premium, most abstract of all arts, to carry everything.
Just think of just even pop music, how powerful it is in our lives, and the music we grew up with, with Bob Dylan now with his new movie, and these music is just incredibly powerful.
Incredibly powerful. So, do we have some questions? Now, I think we can take some questions. Anybody's brave. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this fascinating discussion. I'm curious what other novels you've adapted to opera.
An American Tragedy, Dreiser's novel, Cold Mountain with Lenny, and for Santa Fe Opera. And I have a new one coming up, The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, Michael Chabon's novel, is going to open the Met season next year.
It was just written up?
It was just written up, yeah. And it was, Mason Bates is the composer for that one. And I'm happy to say it's in the can. There might be some others, but those are among the stuff I've worked on. There's some original stuff and some based on some films and other things. But
Hi. Can you talk a little bit about the creative process? Because it would have to have been so collaborative, meaning, obviously you have the composer, yourself, and the dramaturg. And since you were involved from the very beginning, so, between the different drafts and making changes, how did you collaborate?
Well, Gene started feeding me, obviously feeding Jake at the same time, but feeding me scenes, and then I would ask questions and discuss it. I think it was probably 2 years before we got to a workshop. I think it was about 2 years. And then as music and libretto started coming together, we would go to California where Jake lives, and we would basically in his studio, an airless studio.
Yeah.
And we would hammer things out over a few days together, and we'd reach places and we just talk it through. It's I don't know, I sort of can't go detail by detail, but it was just, and again, I was there to respond to things. make suggestions, but they had made the most important decision before I was even involved, which was to set the entire opera at sea. And so that created a framework. So Queequeg and Ishmael, which in the book, of course, happens, their relationship is solidified before they get onto the boat. So that relationship had to be created during the course of the opera. So we see that develop as it goes along in the opera. And so we were always calibrating, like you say, Starbuck, Starbuck's coming up, Greenhorn's coming up. And, by the end, it wasn't until the end that we really knew who the real leading players were. Mm-hmm. So it was just, and every time we got to a section where we had to change, and you may not like this, I would always say, don't worry, this is a great American novel no one's ever read.
That's right.
Who's going to know? Except for the 70 people
Who's going to know?
Just in terms of the nuts and bolts of it, since folks are not writing operas here, I presume, maybe some are, the words come first. The story comes first. The structure comes first. And then, but the words come first, and always have, whether it's Mozart's operas, Puccini's operas, they were all, when they wrote La Bohème, these two guys wrote La Bohème, they worked on it for 2 years, and Puccini kept saying no, and they threw up their hands and said, I give up, and they said, no, keep working on it. And that's what happened here on all these projects, and certainly on this one too. Jake had to have a libretto in order for the music to reflect what's, not just what the words are saying, but what's happening in the scenes, as I was just saying before. But how those scenes were unfolding, I would come up with ideas. I would write long outlines, which became shorter and shorter. I would share things, as Lenny just said, and get Lenny's feedback, and of course Jake's feedback, which was all the way through.
And are you thinking of singers in mind, and is Jake writing music with, do you have kind of vague casting ideas in your mind in terms of voices?
That was all Jake's.
That was Jake's.
That was all Jake's decision on where the voices were. And then something about the process, just to add on to that, is that, and once after about 2 years, when we felt we were ready, we asked for a workshop. And then we had at San Francisco Opera set up something for us, and we heard it all. And then more changes, once you hear it, right, more changes were made from there. Not many changes once you get into the room, but some.
Yeah. In this particular case, not too many. There were changes, but not too many compared to other projects that we've done. It was on its way after that workshop.
It had of all the pieces I've worked on, I think this piece had the most organic process. I've had things that were just handed to me, done, and very little wiggle room in there.
Can I ask you a question? It's not necessarily a political question, but I'm just wondering how, because it is a very political novel, at the moment that it was written in 1851 was a maelstrom of American political upheaval. And I'm just wondering, with both of you, how important Moby-Dick feels in the opera appearing right in this particular moment.
Well, think about it. We have, it's.
I'm thinking about it.
It's Moby-Dick is kind of a microcosm of the world. We have a very. Pardon me?
The ship of state.
Very good. I'll let you use that. But you have a very diverse crew, people from all walks of life, being led to their death by a madman. I'll just leave it at that.
And also, there's lots of, as Linda just said, we have representatives from all over the world, yes, just like in the book. And there's a racial fight on the ship, because that was in 1851. Lord knows that was what's going on, and alas, still plagues the country to some extent. And so, there's a lot of relevance for this story. It's timeless and timeless. That's what Moby-Dick is, and that's why we keep reading it, and hopefully people will enjoy the opera for the same reason. It's like something actually watching rehearsal today. There are reducing like rallies from today when he's rallying. When he's rallying, his crew.
I joked about it, but it's sadly timely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's the way he the way Ahab bends everyone to his will.
And also there's a section in it where he says, like, one cog circle fits into all their various wheels. He said, I cited this before, I thought it would be harder. He has disdain for them. He says he's leading them, come on, let's all do this. He gets behind their back, he says, they're such idiots.
And it's, and his obsession becomes everyone's obsession, with the exception of Starbuck.
So it's,
which really changes something, that the elevation of Starbuck and making him, if not Ahab's equal, then the moral reality of his indecision or his difficulty. It feels hopeful. It feels almost. I mean, he doesn't kill him, and he should have if it's to save everybody. But it's different. It has a different kind of resonance.
It's I must say it's complicated, right? It's you can say he puts down the gun because of his sort of moral compass, and yet in doing so he leads all these folks to his death. He never gets to see his kid again. His indecision, he's calcified and unable to act because of his religious fervor. So I'm on the other hand, he has a moral compass. I mean, so it's complicated, and that's the beautiful thing about it. It isn't well, he made the right choice, he made the wrong choice. It's a complicated. It's just like life.
Right.
And
this is Melville's gift to us: the ambiguity and the complication.
And that's why it rhymes with Shakespeare and such, which of course Melville had on his table when he was writing this. So.
Well, just one more question, and right here, and then we'll have to stop. Go ahead.
I was lucky enough to see the opera in 2012 in San Diego and 2015 in Los Angeles. I'm very much looking forward to the performance, and I really enjoyed your remarks. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the staging. So on one hand, you're able to take advantage of the stature of the Met and have performers in various places and the orchestra somewhere else. And I was wondering how difficult it was for people to maybe work together, hear each other, create a unified experience for the audience. Is that a problem that you had to solve, and how did you deal with it?
Did you say to hear each other?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, last week in rehearsal, Stephen Costello, who originated the part of Greenhorn and is doing it here, I have them both up on high trusses when they're singing opposite each other. He turned to Speeder at one point and just said, "Just letting you know, we can't hear each other," which is difficult. It's a hard thing because they need to hear each other. So I haven't made it easy for them, but these people are such professionals, perfectionists, and somehow they do it. You know what? They can't hear each other the first time, and then all of a sudden they hear each other, and they get used to it. What's the other part of your question? A unified experience for the audience rather than sort of voices. It's an odd thing that we do. We started rehearsal several weeks ago. These people come from all over the world. We're thrown into a room together. They're at all different stages in their careers, and somehow we have to become instantly a crew, and not friends, but colleagues, and trusting each other. And that's one of the hardest jobs as a director, is creating a sense of trust where they can trust each other, fully trust me, and create an environment where everybody feels protected. And so, what I tell to all the singers is, if something is very uncomfortable for you, I'm going to change it. Because we're not going to get a performance that's fun. So, I push them to try it again. But it's not an easy task. Four weeks ago, half of these people were total strangers. They came into a room. I've worked with two of them before in my life. And you come in, they have a music rehearsal, and they're, okay, first scene, this is what we're doing. And it's quite a journey and a lovely experience about being in the theater, that everybody comes together, and I see it. I feel like it's happened there. I hope you've seen it, Tom. I've seen it now, all these people come together, because it's almost like we're holding on to everything for the life. So you have no choice.
Yes. In the heart of this, lost in the heart of the sea.
It sounds like I'm the madman.
I'll contender it. I think one of the things about on the ground with this more, but from the people who work there, the 250 employees that are always there, they bring their A game. They are incredibly supportive, and it doesn't feel as massive as it really is, because people are trying so hard to give everyone an opportunity to excel and make the piece work. And so it's been an incredibly supportive experience. I felt incredibly supported. That's from top to bottom, from Peter Gelb all the way down to the stagehands. I mean, people are they're good at their jobs, and part of being good at their jobs is being supportive.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I've never seen, I've worked with a lot of great places, but they make the cast feel very comfortable. I've got fight directors, climbing directors. There's so many people there to keep them safe, but the crew itself is like, they won't make a move unless they feel everyone is safe, everyone is comfortable there. I don't know how they do it with all these others.
I don't know how they do it either. I don't know how you guys have done it, but you've done it. And I want to thank you so much for coming out to Brooklyn tonight and talking about Moby-Dick, which opening night is March 3rd. So I can't wait myself. I'm dying to see it. And if you stay around for the reception, I think you'll have another opportunity to have a short chat with Gene and Lenny. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking them. Thank you for coming.
There you go.